श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् धीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् लक्ष्मीनाथसमारम्भाम् नाथयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् यो नित्यम् अच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मव्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दयैकसिन्धोः रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणम् प्रपद्ये लोकाचार्याय गुरवे कृष्णपादस्य सूनवे संसारभोगिसन्दष्टजीवजीवातवे नमः।
श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् धीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् यो नित्यमच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मव्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दयैकसिन्धोः रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणम् प्रपद्ये लोकाचार्याय गुरवे कृष्णपादस्य सूनवे संसारभोगिसन्दष्टजीवजीवातवे नमः. We continue with the explanation and understanding of the Mumuksupadi. In the previous class, we had actually examined the concept of whether servitude leads to misery or whether it leads to happiness. Because Sheshatvam Dukkha Rupamahavanno Nattil Kangiradinil Andaniyamamillai Uhanda Vishayattirku Sheshamairukkumirappu Sukhamaha Kangeyale. The 52nd and 53rd sutras. And here in the commentary, Swami Manavala Mamuni very beautifully brings up certain very important concepts that are very close to our lives. Of course, all of us have to engage in some activity or not, irrespective of our status in society. If a person is quite well-to-do, he need not go for a job or employment. He can enjoy life, but he cannot keep quiet. Because the Bhagavad Gita states, Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtati akarma kriti. Any person, irrespective of his age, whether he is a male or female, whether he is an Indian or American or African or any person, any nationality, any what they call as caste, creed, race, whatever it is, he cannot desist from doing anything even for one moment. Because ultimately, until a person is alive, his heart has to function. He has to inhale and exhale if he has to sustain himself, if he has to live. And also, even if he does not engage in any activity physically, mental activity continues to happen. So involuntary physical activities like beating of the heart, which is actually pumping of the blood, then inhaling and exhaling, all these things, and also the digestive organs, which work irrespective of a person, whether he is alive or not. So involuntary physical activities continue to happen, because if they don't happen, then the person cannot live. And even if a person desists from physical activity, he cannot desist from mental activity. So nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtati akarma. Even for one moment or even for a fraction of a moment, he cannot desist from doing anything, doing nothing. So that is one aspect. Second aspect, nowadays, why I am telling nowadays is earlier, when there was the rule of the kings, nearly probably about 100 years ago or earlier, some people in India, they were called as Brahmins. They were actually not asked to undertake any employment. They were actually knowledge people, and therefore they were supported by the state or by the king of the land, so that they could engage in learning and dissemination of knowledge, acquiring and dissemination of knowledge, and also in penance and also spiritual activity. So many people nowadays who report the Indian system that existed earlier, they say these people were actually exploiting the others because they were actually supported by the king for nothing in return. That's what they portray. But in the ancient works, it has been specifically mentioned that the penance that they used to do, the spiritual practices that they used to undertake, the fruits that occurred from those spiritual practices were very of a very high order, and 1/6 of those spiritual prowess were used to quell any rebellion or any terrorist activity or the other types of anti-social activities. So nowadays, whether it is America or whether it is India or France or Japan or any country, so they say if there is more crime, you appoint more policemen. So how much is the ratio of the policemen and the humans? That is the subjects. So there should be one policeman for every 10 people. That is the ideal situation. Then there should be one for, in India, it is one for 150 or 200. So how can you control the crime? It's not like that. So the fruits of the penance was such that people would never ever have even the thought to afflict others in any severe manner. So unless a person plans to undertake some terrorist activity, he cannot do so, because without planning, nothing can be done. So at the planning stage itself, it used to be cut, because if at all somebody felt like that, the power of the spiritually evolved people was such that automatically that mindset of harming others would be done away with. Therefore, they did not need too much of security, as we see too much of police, too much of army, too much of paramilitary forces and things like this. So a small amount of resources of the state or of the country, of the kingdom, was used to support what was known as these Brahmins in those days, for which there would be a great return in the form of absence of rebellion, absence of terrorism, absence of anti-social activities, etc. So this is one aspect which I want people to know, because many people are not aware, and many times when these today I was reading in the New York Times how at every small opportunity the tradition of India is demeaned to give a very bad impression. The tradition of Hinduism is actually trampled upon by people who always engage in saying that Brahmins exploited people, they exploited the others, and even to the extent that several professors from US like Sheldon Pollock, they say Ramayana itself was authored as a tool to trample the other downtrodden or something like that, which is all totally, it's all bogus and totally untrue and totally ridiculous also. But then when there is the concept of servitude, how is it? servitude is always a source of misery, because they say it's a dog struggle for existence or something like that. And always, how much ever the employee puts in, how much ever amount of work the employee puts in, the employer is not satisfied. So he says you have to work more, and he pays less. So that is how we are seeing what is happening today, whether it is America or whether it is India or any country for that matter. That is why Pillai says in those days also, Sheshatvam Dukkharupamahavanno Nattil Kangirathu Innil. It is always seen in the world that the that servitude always begets misery, not happiness. That is why many times when people engage in some business, they say, you are your own boss. You need not serve somebody else. So you undertake business. That's what banks and other institutions who goad the people to engage in business or entrepreneurship, they give such statements. Then he says, Andaniyamamillai Uhanda Vishayatirku Sheshamayirukku Mirappu Sukhamaha Kangayale. I have given the example for this. It is not a general rule, because many a times when a person is having an inclination towards something, he feels very happy to be of service. The classical example that is given is when the mother serves the infant to which she has given birth. So out of great love and affection, she actually engages in cleaning the urine, etc. of the young boy or girl to whom she has given birth. So even though it is a very unclean activity, she engages in it with great love and affection. So there, she feels happy doing those things, because it is uhanda vishayam. It is a matter of great affection or love or inclination. And further, there are certain very important quotations that are taken from various sources. So this book where I am referring to does not give those sources, so I had to conduct a lot of research to find out the sources, and fortunately I found out. And they are extremely applicable to our day-to-day life, and also for the benefit of our benefit actually. So it says, Sarvam paravasham dukkham sarvam atmavasham sukham etat proktam samasena lakshanam sukha dukkhayoho. I had heard about the first stanza, that is first half of the stanza. The second second half of the stanza I had not heard. So it says, what is the difference between sukha and dukkha, happiness and misery? So it is very beautifully, succinctly summarized in half a shloka. It says, Sarvam paravasham dukkham. Anything that is beyond our control or in the control of others is a cause of misery. Anything and everything that is under our control is a cause of happiness. So this is what the great Manu has mentioned. Yadvai kincha manuravadat tad bheshadam. That's what the Vedic passages say. Whatever Manu, who is actually the incarnation of Lord Vishnu only, he has said, is bheshadam. It is beneficial. We have to accept it. We have to know it, etc. So it says, Etat proktam samasena lakshanam sukha dukkhayoho. So this is the most concise explanation of what is happiness and misery. And there cannot be a more concise explanation. That's what it says. So I am sure you also can think over this very beautiful concept. So that which is under our control is always the source of happiness. That which is not in our control or in the control of others is always the source of misery. So a very, very beautiful statement. So if seva or servitude or sheshatva is voluntary, is self-made done out of one's own volition, then what happens? It is always a source of great happiness. Whereas it is compulsory or made done out of compulsion on account of others, other persons, or on account of other factors like money, etc., then definitely it is a source of misery. So this is one very important thing. Second thing is he has quoted some more verses. One verse from Bhagavatam, which is very, very important. It says, Mrita mritabhyam jiveta mritena pramritena va satya mritabhyam jiveta shvavritya kathanchana. This is from the Srimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, 7th Skandha, 11th chapter, shloka number 18. So the 11th chapter of the 7th Skandha is all about the code of conduct with regard to the human beings. So Nrinam Sanatana Dharmaha, Varna Dharmaha, Stri Dharmashta. So here it says, Rita Amritabhyam Jiveta, Mritena Pramritena va, Satya Amritabhyam Jiveta, Na Shvavritya Kadachana. So we have two very important concepts. Generally, these concepts are not known to people who have not studied the Sanskrit Shastras but give discourses on this Mumuksupadi. I'm not telling this to belittle anybody, but generally they will ignore these quotations and they will go forward because they are more interested in the religious aspect. But as a Sanskrit person or as a person who has studied Sanskrit for several years, and as a person who would like to understand all the aspects of the Shastras, especially the Mumuksupadi commentary, these things appeal more to me. And therefore, I want to give a detailed exposition about these things. I hope you will not mind and also enjoy. Because the scholars of the Tamil origin, they will generally not give any prominence to these shlokas from sources like Manusmriti or Srimad Bhagavatam. They will give more prominence to the Divya Prabandhas. As Ubhaya Vedantins, it is our duty to give equal prominence to both the Vedantas. And these are very, very important concepts because in the Vedanta works, we come across two important concepts, that is Rita and Satya. Ritancha Swadhyaya Pravachaneta, Satyancha Swadhyaya Pravachaneta, etc. What is the difference between Rita and Satya? This is a very, very, very important or very, very difficult question to answer. Because there is one statement which says Satyancha Anuritancha Satyam Abhavat in the Taittiriya Upanishad. So Rita and Satya are many times used as synonyms. And therefore the antonyms of these two, that is Anurita and Asatya, are used as synonyms. But there is a very enigmatic statement which says Satyancha Anuritancha Satyam Abhavat. Satyancha Anuritancha Satyam Abhavat. So Anurita is opposite of or the antonym of Rita. That and Satya together became Satya. What does this mean? It's a very enigmatic statement. But apart from the Rita and Satya, this verse gives many more related concepts like Rita, Amrita, Mrita, Pramrita, and Satya and Amrita. Rita, Amrita, Mrita, Pramrita and Satya. 5 different types of realities, we can say like this. Because Satya is truth or reality. Rita also is a type of Satya, the truth or reality, which is the highest. But they are not totally synonymous, because the Narayana Upanishad says, Ritagam Satyam Param Brahma Purusham Krishna Pingalam. If both of them were synonyms, they would not have been told side by side. Those two words would not have been told side by side. And one very important aspect is, in Sanskrit we have several synonyms. For example, I don't think in English we have that number of synonyms for a word. For example, if I say pot, I don't. I feel my knowledge of English is fairly good. But what is the synonym of the word pot? I don't know. Or for example, if I say white, how many synonyms are there for the word white or black for that matter? In Sanskrit, we have several synonyms for the word white. Shukla, Shubhra, Shuchi, Shveta, Harida, Shveta, Pandara, Shukla, Shubhra, Shuchi, Shveta, Harida, Shveta, Pandara, etc. Or if you take the word Ghata, you have Kalasha. You have several other words like this. Kumbha, Kalasha, Ghata, etc. I randomly remember 3. I am sure there will be not less than 10. So in Sanskrit, the language is so rich. For example, if you take the word Deva, Amara, Nirjara, Deva, Stridasha, Vipudha, Suraha, Suparvana, Sumanasa, Tridiveta, Divokasa, Aditeya, Divishado, Nekha, Ditinandana, Adityar, Bhavo, Swapna, Amartya, Amritan, Parihirmukha, Kratujo, Girvana, Danavareha, Mandaraka, Devata, Nipumsiva, Devata, Sniyam, Aditya, Vishwasa, Stushita, Bhaswara, Nilaha. So you have 34 synonyms for the word Deva, demigod. I am sure it is not available in any other language, especially English. So what happens is, here Satya and Rita are not synonyms. That is very sure. That is for sure. But they have meanings which are very near to each other in the sense of truth. That is why, but we have to translate Satya also as truth, Rita also as truth. Then if there is any other word with a similar meaning, which has a different shade of meaning, that also is translated as truth. So that is why recently this Rajiv Malhotra has written the Sanskrit non-translatables. So there is no equivalent in any other language for these Sanskrit words that we have to understand. So having said that, he says, Satya, I hope you will not mind my slight elaboration on this concept, because not other people will generally not touch upon this concept at all. Chaturtha Ayusham Rita Mritabhyam Jiveta Mritena Pramritena Va Satya Mritabhyam Jiveta Nashvavritya Kadachana. That's what the Srimad Bhagavatam says. You can live by means of Amrita or Rita, Amrita, Mrita, Pramrita and Satya. Nashvavritya Kadachana. If the service in which you are engaging is like the dog's struggle for existence, don't do it. And then he quotes from the Mumuksupadi, which says very beautifully, it actually says what is Rita, what is Satya, what is Amrita, Amrita, etc. The Mumuksupadi 4th chapter is a very beautiful chapter. Of course, it may not be applicable, much of it might not be applicable today, because it says Rita Mritabhyam Jiveta. The same verse This is very important, Keshadas ji. The same verse it is found in Bhagavatam is also found verbatim in the Manusmriti also. Fourth chapter, fourth verse. Vrita vritabhyam jive tu mritena pramritena va satya vritabhyam apiva anashvavritya kathanchana. And then what are these? What is Vrita? What is Amrita, etc.? Vritam unchashilam jneyam. So what is Vrita? What is by means of which one can do a livelihood? In those days, there were these places where the corn used to be harvested. So after the master of the land, after harvesting the corn, or whether it is paddy or whether it is some other corn or grain for that matter, he used to leave a certain amount of grain or corn or paddy or whatever it is, some grain, in the place where the harvesting used to be done. So a person, he can actually go there and take the leftover and bring it home, and he can consume those paddy or whichever type of grain. So that is known as uncha shilam jneyam. So that is known as rita. Then amritam syad ayachitam. So ritena jiveta, one can live by means of rita. Then amritam syad ayachitam. Amritam means when something is given to a person without him asking for it. That is known as amrita. Amritam syad ayachitam, that which is obtained without asking for or without begging for. But what is mrita? Mritam tu yachitam bhaikshyam. If a person begs for some alms, 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 and he gets it, it is known as mrita. What is pramrita? Pramritam, karshanam smritam. If one earns a livelihood by means of plowing and other things, that is known as pramritam. And satyamritam tu vanijyam tena chaiva apijivyate seva shvavrittirakhyata tasmattam parivarjaye. And one can also engage in vanijya, that is commerce. So that commerce is satyanrita. That means it is a combination of the highest truth and also a sort of untruth. Because always in commerce, you actually, for example, especially in things like trading, you purchase an item for a lower price and then sell it for a higher price and make a profit. But in that profit, what percentage of profit is acceptable according to dharma? That is a very, very, very difficult question to answer. So that is why it says satyandritam tu vanijyam tena chaivapi jivyate seva shvavrittirakhyata tasmattam parivarjaye. So one should actually give up what is known as servitude, because servitude is always a dog's struggle for existence. That's what it says here. That is, and then he says how many types of dhanyas are there, how they have to be procured, etc. But when I was reading it, because we have a great sage called Kanada. So his name is Kanada, Kananatti iti Kanada. That means he used to actually go to the places where they used to harvest the grain. And then in those days, for the sake of dharma, they used to leave or not harvest a particular percentage of that. So people then used to go there and then they used to procure it and bring that home and cook and eat. So that is what one of the greatest sages of India named Kanada, who is also known as Akshapada, he used to do it. But whether that was enough to sustain people, how much they used to get, if there are about 5 people or say 10 people in the household, is it enough to sustain all their needs? Today, for example, if 2 people are there or 3 people are there, how many items we require? So if the person consumes coffee, he requires coffee powder, then sugar is required, and then so many other small items are required. Even for cooking, if a person has to cook a very good meal, nearly 10 to 12 items are required to cook an ordinary meal also. So in such a scenario, what happens? How they used to do? That's a mystery. We don't have much information. But ultimately what? Seva Shvavrittirakyata. Why I mentioned this is, all these give us a glimpse of how dharma was in the ancient times of our sages. So he says, அபிமத விஷயத்தில் சேஷத்துவம் சுகரூபமாகிறது, அவ்விஷயத்தில் குணமடியாக வந்ததாகியாரே என்னோ என்னருளிச் செய்கிறார். அகாரத்திலே என்ன தொடங்கி அகாரத்திலே கல்யாண குணங்களைச் சொல்லுகையாரே இந்த சேஷத்துவம் குணத்தாலே வந்தது. So ultimately he says, servitude, which is voluntary, which is self-driven, in the sense it is done with on one's own volition, and also not with the idea of expecting something in return, something worldly in return. That is very important. Of course, because when we serve God, we are desirous of attaining moksha. That is the first level. But afterwards, what happens? When one becomes totally immersed in the servitude of the Lord, he says, I don't expect to be given moksha also. That is why one of our Purvacharya says, Vaikuntavasepi name bhilashaha. If I am given the privilege of serving you eternally, I don't want to come to Vaikuntha also. That is what he says. And several other acharyas and alvars have mentioned like that. But it should be gunakrita. It should be on account of the quality of the person who is being served. So since the Supreme Lord is possessing all the kalyana gunas, all the auspicious qualities, and devoid of even one inauspicious quality or fallacy, it is a great privilege to serve him. That is why even Yamunacharya says, Tava dasya sukhaika sanginam bhavaneshu astvapi kita janmame. He says, I am ready to be born even as an insect, where I have the opportunity of being along with people who are engaged in your eternal service and enjoying the happiness of serving you. Itara vasateshu masma bhudapi me janma chaturmukhatmana. And I don't want to have the position of Chaturmukha Brahma also, where there is an opportunity to serve you does not come, or where I am not associated with people who are engaged in your service. That's what Yamunacharya says. So here it says, Akarattale kalyana gunangale chullu hirapa chullu hiyale shesha inda sheshatvam gunattale vandade. So when we say the individual soul is eternally in the service of Jivatma, of the Paramatma, is it something that is to be lamented upon, or is it something that is to be rejoiced upon? It is something to be rejoiced upon, because Akarattale kalyana gunangale chulluyale. Akara, of course, denotes the Supreme Lord Narayana. But through which aspect or through which angle? because he is the repository of all the auspicious qualities that can exist in the world. So if such a greatest person can exist, what is more happy, what is more rejoice, what is more happier? There is nothing more happier than engaging in the service of such a great person, or the greatest person among persons. So that's what he says. அதாவது ஈஸ்வரனுடைய ரக்ஷகத்துவ பிரதிபாதகமான அகாரத்திலே அந்த ரக்ஷணோபயோகியான கல்யாண குணங்களை சொல்லுகையாலே ஈஸ்வர விஷயமான இந்த சேஷத்துவம் அந்த குணங்களடியாக வந்தது என்கை. So I will give an example from the Shastras. So certain adjectives, when they are given, they are actually very significant. So in the Alankara Shastra, the Kolya, in the Chandraloka, a very beautiful figure of speech is mentioned. The figure of speech is Parikara Alankara, that's what they say. Parikara Alankara of Parikaraha Sabhipraya Visheshanaihi. So, when an adjective is used to describe a person, and when the adjective is very meaningful and apt, then that figure of speech is known as Parikara Alankara, or the figure of speech known as Parikara. So when you actually study Sanskrit literature, and I take this opportunity to expose some of you who may not be very familiar with Sanskrit literature to explain its greatness. In English, you have about 10 to 15 figures of speech like metaphor or simile, etc. But in Sanskrit, we have not less than 100 figures of speech, which are all greatly explained in a very succinct and simple manner by the greatest Vishnu Bhaktas, one of the greatest Vishnu Bhaktas, namely Jayadeva Kavi, who has authored a beautiful work called Chandraloka, where he has given both the definition and example of all the figures of speech. So 100 figures of speech are there. And for example, in metaphor itself, there are 12 different metaphors. So 12 different metaphors are mentioned in the Chandraloka. And if you take simile, you have 8 different types of similes and one main simile. So like that, the figures of speech that are mentioned in the Sanskrit literature are a great thing, which are very much enjoyable for the connoisseur. So here, for example, when an adjective is used to denote a person, and if that adjective is very apt and meaningful, then it is known as Parikara Alankara, or the metaphor of speech. It is known as the figure of speech called Parikara. So for example, an example is given. So this is purely in the context of the Alankara Shastra. So it should be taken only as an example. So a person wanted to mention that Parvati embraced Lord Shiva. Then what is the adjective that is to be used to denote Shiva? So Parvati, there is the wrong example is Parvati Pinakapaninam Adilinga. So Parvati embraced the person who was sporting the great bow called Pinaka. So Pinakaha Ajagavam Dhanuhu. So the bow of Lord Vishnu is known as Sharanga, whereas the bow of Lord Vishnu is known as, Lord Shiva is known as Pinaka. So Pinaka Pani means the person who is holding the bow called Pinaka in his hand, that is Lord Shiva. So here he says, when does Parvati embraced Shiva who was holding the Pinaka or the bow? Is it a very apt adjective or not? No. Of course, it denotes the meaning. Pinakapani means Lord Shiva only. So it's as good as saying he embraced Lord Shiva, which is fine. But actually, when does a person hold the bow? When he is ready to go for a war. So he is actually in a very angry mood. So suppose when we are very angry, somebody comes to embrace us, we feel get lost. I am in such a bad mood. Why are you coming and embracing me now? So this usage is not very apt. Whereas if a person says Parvati Chandrashekharam Adilinga, Parvati embraced the person who is having the moon on his forehead or on his head. So the moon is the embodiment of happiness. Anybody who sees the moon will feel happy. That's what the Indian literary texts say. And it is the matter of our experience also. So here, the moon is always, so when the moon is rising, it gives rise to a very romantic mood, which lovers actually cherish. So we can definitely feel the contrast between Parvati Pinakapaninam Malininga and Parvati Chandrashekharam Malininga. So Parvati embraced Lord Shiva having the moon, the crest on his crest. So always the adjective should be very, very, very apt, and it should be in accordance with the situation or context. So here he says, Ishwaranudaya Rakshakattva Pratipadakamanakaratile. What are we doing here? We are saying Om Namo Narayanaya and expressing our Sharanagati or surrender to the Supreme Lord. So to whom should a person surrender? A person should surrender to the person who is capable of protecting him. So suppose I go and surrender to a person who is a beggar on the streets. Will he protect me? No, my surrender will be useless. So surrender always has to be to a person who can actually protect the person who is surrendering. Here the akara denotes that particular quality of the Supreme Lord, which is Ishwaranudiya Rakshakattva Pratipadakaman Akaratile. Akara denotes the fact that the Supreme Lord is the protector of one and all. Therefore, it is very much apt and what we call as Auchitya Purna or Uchita. It is apt and in the fitness of things that the Jivatma surrenders to the Supreme Lord, who is extremely capable of protecting the Jivatma or the individual soul. So Ishwaranudiya Rakshakattva Pratipadakaman Akaratile and the Rakshanopayogyana Kalyana Gunangale Chulluhayale. And it also is the denoter of all the auspicious qualities that are conducive for his protection, conducive or that are very useful for the act of protection of the Jiva. Therefore, Ishvara Vishayamana inda Sheshattvamam anda Gunangaladiyaha vandadu engai. Therefore, the surrender is never a cause of misery. It is a cause of great happiness and liberation. So the very syllable A is the denoter of all the auspicious qualities that are associated with the aspect of the Lord giving us abhaya or taking us under his protection. And therefore, here Sheshatva is very much meaningful. It is very much useful. It is of great benefit to the Jivatma. So that is what is mentioned in the 54th Sutra. Akarattile Kalyana Gunangadai Chollohayale in the Sheshatvam Gunattare Vandadi. And then in the 55th Sutra he says, and before that, Manavana Mamuni concludes the commentary of the Sutra by saying, Ahayal idum Sukharupama irukka kurai illai enrikkarukku. Therefore, it is the Sheshatva, the servitude of the Jivatma, begets utmost happiness and delight, and can never result in any misery at all whatsoever. How many superlatives you can use, there is nothing wrong in that. And then the 55th Sutra he says, Sheshatvame Atma Swarupam Sheshatvamillada Podu Swarupam illai Atma Paharamavadu Swatantramingira Ninaivu Swatantramam Podu illayai Vidum. So these three sutras are very significant as far as the Shri Vaishnava Sampradaya and philosophy, religion and philosophy are concerned. It says, Sheshatvame Atma, the very nature of the Jivatma is Sheshatva, subservience. And the next sutra says, same thing from a negative point of view. Sheshatvam illada podu swarupam illai. When there is no Sheshatva, it means the Jivatma has lost his identity. And further he stresses upon the same statement. He says, Atma paharamavade swatantram ingira. So a person who has lost his self, who has lost himself, he is one who thinks, I am independent. I can do whatever I want. And then he says, Swatantramam podu illai vidum. If a person feels, I am independent, he will lose himself, he will lose his identity, he will lose his very being or existence. This is once again beautifully commented upon by Swami Manavala Mamuni, which we will see in the next session. So with these words, I end today's session. We have a small period of time for interaction.
So Swami, emphasizing the Sheshatva of the Chaitanya, of the Jiva. Some people say that you can engage in Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga because all these paths are given in the Shastra. And other people say that even to engage in these paths is against the true nature of the Jivatman as being utterly dependent upon the Lord, and that only property is the way.
So that is why actually in the Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, in the final shloka of the Bhagavad Gita, final in the sense, final as far as the instruction is concerned, because afterwards it is the conclusion. So even Ramanujacharya actually comments upon it by saying, give up Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, etc. and surrender unto me. That's what he says. But the main nuance that is to be noted there is not swarupataha tyaga, but phalataha tyaga. Not giving up. Are you able to understand the difference between swarupatas tyaga and phalataha tyaga? Suppose I perform sandhya, I perform a particular sacrifice, let us say agnishtoma or jyotishtoma or something like that. But I will not, so it's like I will actually, I will give a very, very easily understandable example. Now I want to serve America. And suppose I am given a very big post, I am the Secretary of State of America, where I negotiate with all the different heads of state and see that America has very strong foreign policy or something like that. So then if I want to serve, I am given that post and I am given an opportunity to serve, and I will get some $100,000 as a salary per month. But I will say, since I want to serve America, I will not take any salary, but I will work for America. That is phalataha tyaga. But suppose I have to earn a livelihood and I have to work in a bank or something like that. I say I will not work at all. That is swarupataha tyaga. So whether it is karma yoga or jnana yoga or bhakti yoga, they have to be performed. Because before in the 18th chapter itself, Lord Krishna says, all these have to be performed. And even, for example, kaya klesha bhayat na tyajet. Suppose a person says, oh, we discuss in our house many times when we perform the Krishna Jayanti or Sri Jayanti as we call it, where we perform so many dishes to offer to Lord Krishna. Then we say now our physical capabilities are diminishing day by day. So we will try to offer as little, as much as our physical strength permits us to do. But Lord Krishna says, kaya klesha bhayat na tyajit. Oh, since I am not able to perform that much, I leave. No, that's not correct. So though Ramanujacharya comments upon the verse by saying that Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Adin, Tyaja, Tyaktva. Giving up Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, he says, not by giving them totally, giving up the fruits that occur from them. That's what he says. So then what happens if you say that these are all Swarupa Viruddha, then it actually amounts to saying that they are all Papa Karmas or sins. No, it's not like that. Have I answered your question?
Yes.
Because if you say Sarvadharman Parityaja, if you give up all these things, it's as if like you say give up speaking the untruth, give up doing afflicting somebody or censuring somebody. It's not like that. It's not as if they are Nishiddha karmas. But sometimes some scholars, while commenting upon the such verses, they say give up all that, even that is Swarupa Viruddha means, then is doing Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, is it equal to killing somebody or engaging in some prohibited activity like consumption of alcohol or something like that? No. So it's not like that. That is why phalataha tyagaha is what is mentioned there.
So this phrase in the Charma Sloka, Sarvadharman Parityaja, it should be taken as not as a vidi, but as an arthavad, as an explanation
No,
of.
not as an arthavad, not as an arthavada. So you don't do it without any purpose or fruits in mind. Do it purely as Bhagavad Kainkariya, without expecting anything in return. It is the service of Lord which you are doing and not expecting anything in return. That is why I said Parityaja means Palataha Tyaga. So that is why I said you engage in a job, but you don't take the salary. Then why are you doing it? I am doing it for the love of labor, we say. I am sure you are familiar with this phrase, which is a love of labor. So just engaging in that activity itself gives me so much happiness. So why should I take a salary? Suppose you are working in a temple and you are offering some tulsi or something every day. They say, we want to offer you a salary of some $100. You say, no, I will not accept any salary because the very act of offering tulsi gives me so much of happiness. So I will not accept any salary. So that is phalataha tyaga. You give up the fruits of the activity, not the activity itself. Okay?
Yes, very good.
Yes. So any other questions?
Adiyan Dasan, Namaskaram. This is Ram Srinivas Swami.
Yes,
Swami,
namaskaram.
Namaskaram. I just have one question. Actually, I have two questions. The first question is, which among the Tyagas is the foremost Tyaga? That is my first question. My second question is, you had said that even in the times of emergency, we should not engage in the profession of a dog. Basically, we should not engage in the service of low-grade persons. So could you elaborate on what is that swavritti? Yeah. Thank you, Swami.
And that is in an ideal situation today. So whether it is applicable today in today's scenario when the levels of dharma have greatly deteriorated, is in this Kali Yuga. So we have, because all of us have to earn a livelihood, and the livelihoods and the methods of living that were, as is mentioned in the Mumuksupadi, etc., where people, they used to go to some place where the corn or grain was harvested, and they used to bring the leftover and then lead a life. So that is not possible today. So you have to engage in the servitude. Many a times, all of us have to take up jobs for the sake of livelihood, and invariably we actually have to serve people of very low caliber and very low values. So today that rule cannot be applied in a very general sense. So and one more thing is, we do it with a sense of renunciation. So I have to earn a livelihood. For that purpose I am doing this. But for my spiritual life, I will devote some time and engage in the service of the Lord only. So that is how it has been mentioned in today's context. That is the answer to the second question. What was the first question?
Which among the Tyaga is the foremost Tyaga?
That is what is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. Estu karma phala tyagam prahus tyagam vichakshanaha.
Okay.
So you have to give up the fruits of all the activities that you do. That means how to give up the fruits. What do you mean by giving up the fruits? That means, should I not take salary or something? It's not like that. The methodology described is, whatever you do it as the service of the Supreme Lord. Then you will not actually get bound by it. That is why the Bhagavad Gita says, convert karma into karma yoga. Don't be unduly attracted by the fruits that you get by performing something good. And also, whatever you do it as a service to the Supreme Lord. Then you will not be bound by it. So even if you will have an ice cream, for example. I'll give a very mundane example. So I am very enamored about ice creams. So if I want to have an ice cream, what do? So before I actually partake of the ice cream, I think about the Lord and offer the ice cream to the Lord. And then I partake it as His prasad. Then you are not bound by it, because you are associating this activity with the Supreme Lord, which will not bind you. Even if you have to engage in some activity that is against the socially accepted norms due to some compulsions, then also you request for suppose now we have to engage in certain unethical activities in our jobs. Suppose a student is not fit to pass, but my principal or my boss says you have to pass him because I have told him that he will be passed. Then what do? Should I resign the job or should I listen to the principal? As a principal, he is also empowered to tell me something and direct me something. But what I am doing is not according to the rules, or it's not according to what we call as nyaya or niti or the righteous thing I am doing. So then you ask for the forgiveness of the Lord and then tell him that out of compulsion I am doing this, kindly excuse me. And then you engage in that activity to the minimum possible extent. So this is how it has been mentioned by our forefathers.
Thank you very much, Swami. Namaskaram.
चेद्रामानुजेत्येषा चतुरा चतुरक्षरी कामवस्तां प्रपद्यन्ते जन्तवो हन्तमादृशः पुण्यां भोजविकासाय पापध्वान्तक्षयाय च श्रीमानाविरभूत् भूमौ रामानुजदिवाकरः तृणीकृतविरिञ्चादिनिरङ्कुशविभूतयः रामानुजपदाम्भोजसमाश्रयणशालिनः।